interesting. That cartoon version of The Wizard of Oz predates the MGM Judy Garland live-action film by about 6 years. But it's so interesting to see the similarities. And back once more to talk about the studio that produced those shorts, Van Beuren, is animation historian Steve Stanchfield. Let's talk a little about what was going on in the mid-30s, because the Van Beuren studios actually went out of business.
They did.
Kind of pushed out by Disney, would you say?
This is the interesting thing. Both the cartoon industry had started to go through significant changes by the mid-30s. Disney was starting to produce his Snow White film, so needed to have a major motion picture studio. And Van Beuren had started to produce better product, started to be noticed. It probably isn't Disney's rivalry with Van Beuren that put them out of business, but the fact that RKO was now Disney's distributor seemed to indicate to RKO that it would be better to not distribute the Van Beuren films anymore. At first, the Van Beuren studio was going to distribute their films alongside Disney's films at RKO, and that ended up not happening. But rather than seek another distributor, Van Beuren decided to close that studio. There were other things going on with Van Beuren's live-action films, because he was a producer of live-action films as well. So he shut down his whole operation in 1936.
Interesting. Now, were there a lot of other companies with cartoon shorts competing at that time?
Oh, yeah. Every studio had a cartoon studio working with them. Some were owned by the studio and some were contracted.
So Disney had a lot of competition.
Oh, yeah. It's safe to say, though, that the Disney and the Fleischer films were the most popular.
Right.
And MGM's films and Van Beuren cartoons were probably the next up.
So what would you say was the legacy of the Van Beuren studios?
There were artists that worked at Van Beuren that ended up at all of the other studios, and in fact made great films at a lot of the other studios. So as a training ground, Van Beuren is invaluable. Animators like Art Babbitt started there. So many animators. Bill Hanna, who later formed Hanna-Barbera,
right,
cut his teeth on the Tom and Jerry cartoons. So there were great artists that started at Van Beuren from men that ended up doing great things at other studios.
Interesting. So if people wanted to see more of their work, like we've just shown them today, where would they go?
You can look online. You can see the cartoons that way. There's also video releases. I have a little company called Thunderbeam that releases a lot of Van Beuren cartoons. And it's been wonderful to be able to share those cartoons with people.
So what are you up to today?
We're working right now restoring the Flip the Frog cartoons, which is...
Where did Flip the Frog come from?
They were the creation of Hugh Byworks, who was the man who drew Mickey Mouse first and was Disney's partner at the early Disney studio. He branched out on his own in 1930 and developed a whole series of cartoons, with Flip the Frog being his first character.
How great.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
And you really taught us some good lessons about this whole animation world.
Thanks. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, we're saying goodbye to Steve right now, but we have some more animation classics coming up. Next is a particularly interesting film, one of the very first full-length feature movies done in an animation process. This process called silhouette animation, and it predates by 11 years the film often called the first animated feature film, Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in 1938. Ours is a movie from Germany in 1927. Stay with us.
Tonight on TCM's Silent Sunday Night, Bothwell Brown does some dandy impersonating as a Yankee Doodle in Berlin. Then the spotlight's on Turkish society and law of the border. And a tobacco farmer interrupts the flow of things one dry summer.
You're invited to world premiere restorations of Spartacus, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Apollo 13, the 2015 TCM Classic Film Festival, March 26th to 29th in Hollywood. Passes on sale now at tcm.com/festival.